Hey gang, it's James W. Pickering back here again, and now I'm going to talk about the original Star Wars trilogy. So this will be epic, or as epic as it can be. um, so it's crazy because I was born in '95, the same year that the last time that the original trilogy would come out in its unaltered form before they made all the changes for the special editions. And they kept making all the changes for the DVDs and the Blu-rays and the 4Ks and I guess even the Disney Plus, which is like the same as the 4Ks or whatever. Um, but yeah, I was born in '95, and to tell you the truth, I actually got into Star Wars when I was 8 years old, and so I was a GameCube kid growing up back then, and I used to play a lot of Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 and also 3. I know people seem to don't like the third one, but I like both 2 and 3 and even the first one on the N64. But anyway, so because those games being set during the time of the originals, it made me want to go and watch the original trilogy. So, I watched all three of them when I was 8 years old back in the end of 2003, right before they came out on DVD for the first time. But yeah, I mean, Star Wars, which everybody calls A New Hope, that movie back when it came out in '77, it blew everyone away, because at that time, um, a lot of movies were considered to be very like gritty and downbeat and had anti-heroes. This one was like some good old-fashioned swashbuckling with some pretty neat, groundbreaking effects from Industrial Light and Magic, which George Lucas had to go out and create because there was no other effects company like them. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, A New Hope, you know, when I was little, I always used to relate to the character of Luke Skywalker, the farm boy who's just a small nobody who wants to become a big somebody. And, he does. You know, I will say though, for me, that, after rewatching the originals all over again, I do like the parts where 3PO and R2 land on Tatooine, and then 3PO wants to get away, but R2 is trying to deliver Princess Leia's message to Obi-Wan, and they split apart, but they only get captured by the Jawas. And then also, I always remembered, being really like shocked by the scene where the sand person attacks Luke Skywalker until Obi-Wan scares him away and then revives Luke. And then that's when Luke at first doesn't think he'll be able to go and help save Leia, but you know, then he finds out that his uncle and aunt are murdered by the Imperials, so he has to go out. And seeing that shot of the skeletons of Owen and Beru, I always thought, like, oof, that is really tough. you know. So yeah, I mean, when Luke goes out and he helps Obi-Wan, and then they get Han and Chewie, and I do like the part when they're dressed up as the stormtroopers, and it's just like you can cause so much havoc crashing the party on the Death Star when trying to rescue Leia, and then they get stuck in the garbage compactor. And when I was little, no joke, that scene used to actually scare me. Like, I'm like, oh my god, are they gonna make it out alive? Oh man, good times, man. And then also really emotional seeing Obi-Wan get killed by Vader, and Luke has got to move on forward. But when they get to the rebels, and then the space battle, the rebels going against the Imperials on the Death Star, that is some pretty epic stuff right there. I mean, you know especially when when the gold leader and then the red leader. Well, gold they fly the Y wings, and then the red they fly the X wings. When both the gold and red leaders they fail, and then Luke, inadvertently he has to, try to put an end to the Death Star since his wingman Biggs gets shot down, and then Wedge has to leave. you know, um, but then at first, because earlier when Han Solo says he doesn't want to team up because he wants to pay off Jabba the Hutt, but then he has a change of heart and he saves Luke from Vader, and then Luke blows up the Death Star, and like him and Han get awarded the medals by Leia, and like that looked like it could have been like one really cool like standalone movie right there. I mean, just imagine like back in 77 you just saw Star Wars, and then it's like, what do you do? Where do you go from there? Well, you get Empire Strikes Back. And the funny thing is that back in 1980, I don't think a lot of people really liked Empire because they thought it was too dark compared to Star Wars. But I will say, like, I would say for me that Empire is the best movie in all the 9 episodic Star Wars movies. Christ. I mean, you know, the opening battle on Hoth, that is amazing with the AT-ATs. Just the fact that they used like stop motion puppets for them, and then the speeders have to destroy them, but they have to use the harpoon and tow cables and they swing around. That is really good stuff. All these years later. And this is all before CGI, which is even more impressive. It makes it a little more realistic. But Han and Leia and Chewie and 3PO, and they fly in the Falcon, and the hyperdrive is beating the crap out of, and so they have to land in the asteroid, but it's actually the slug. And then Han and Leia fall in love. And he's like, "You're trembling." And she's like, "I only like light and nice men, not scoundrels." And he's like, "Scoundrels, I like that." And then eventually they have to flee because those Minox, those pterodactyls, they're chewing up the hyperdrive of the Falcon, and then they accidentally shoot what they think is the cave, but it's a slug, and then they have to fly out. And then meanwhile, Luke and R2, they go to Dagobah. And I love the part when Luke is like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's safe for droids." And then like 5 seconds later, they're having all the trouble, and then they have to crash land in the swamp. Oops. It's pretty funny. And then R2 gets spat out of the water, and then they meet Yoda, and then Luke doesn't think it's Yoda at first, and he's acting really goofy by throwing all of Luke's luggage from the X-Wing. But then when he has dinner with him, and then he's like, "We're wasting our time," and then Yoda pulls the twist, and he's like, "I cannot teach him. The boy has no patience." And like I will say that Luke and Yoda, their scenes I feel are the best in the movie. Like there's no lightsabers, there's no action and explosions. It's just a lot of very like thought provoking, I would want to say. I mean, Luke still thinks he is very confident that he takes his lightsaber and he thinks he's fighting Vader, but he's really fighting himself. Like that really implies that Luke has still got a lot to learn. But eventually after they get their X-Wing out the swamp, and Luke, he knows Han and Leia are being held captive, so he has to go and rescue them, even though Obi-Wan and Yoda tell him not to, but he just goes anyway. And like seeing Han Solo and friends getting captured, and then seeing them being held captive, like I'm not gonna lie, that like really made me sad as a kid. And then Han getting frozen in the carbonite, like it's such great stuff. Like, and right before he gets frozen, like Leia says, "I love you," and he's like, I know. Just, oh my God, I could go on all day. And then, eventually Lando Calrissian, who is friends with Han, and at first he helps the Imperials, but then he just betrays the Imperials and helps Chewie and Leia and 3PO get out of there, even though, they don't believe him at first, but, they eventually earn his trust. And then Luke fights Darth Vader, and what I feel, even though Phantom Menace has like the best spectacle of a lightsaber fight, I feel like this one has a lot of emotional depth to it. And I always thought that Darth Vader was cheating when he was using the Force to throw all the objects at Luke, and then Luke gets thrown out the window. And then eventually he gets his hand cut off, and then Vader's like, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. And Luke is like, he told me you killed him. And then Vader says, no, I am your father. And Luke is like, no, no. And then Luke just falls down the chasm. I mean, there was that one change they made back in 97 where they had Luke screaming. Like, does anyone remember that? That was so dumb. But then, like, the DVDs and Blu-rays, they just took out the scream, because Luke does not act like a coward. So, yeah, and then, Leia and Lando, they free him. Well, they rescue him when he's about to fall off Cloud City. I mean, that would be pretty scary if I was there. And then R2 eventually fixes the hyperdrive. It's kind of funny how, like, if R2 or any Astro droid went with Han and friends when they were escaping Hoth, they probably could have just fixed the hyperdrive right then and there. But all in all, I mean, Empire, it's still a great movie and highly recommended. And then Return of the Jedi, which, Return of the Jedi always seemed like it's the lighter of the original three. And, I have to agree. And it's not as good as Star Wars or Empire. But I still like Return of the Jedi. I mean, the part where Luke has to free, Han and Chewie and Leia, as well as the droids, in the Sarlacc pit scene, I thought that was awesome. And then eventually, yeah, and then also this is the one where Obi-Wan's ghost tells Luke that Leia is his sister, and then it's just, if you look back at Star Wars and Empire when they kiss, it's just like, oh. And then I do like how, we get the speeder bike chase in Endor, and especially that sound that the speeders make. It's like, that sound will always stick with me in my head through the rest of time. And also, one other part I do like is the part where Luke does tell Leia that they're siblings and that, Vader is their dad, and, about when, their families. That I thought was a pretty awesome scene. And, it's a scene I definitely watch again. Again, it's not just all action. It's very thought-provoking too. That's what you gotta love about the original trilogy, is that they really handled a lot of good emotions amongst the characters. I mean, and also like amazing cast from, Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, rest in peace, and Harrison Ford. Man. And I do like how even though it's kind of silly that the Ewoks help the rebels topple the Imperials, and then when they have to eventually get inside the shield bunker, and then they destroy up the bunker, and then while Luke has to go and face Vader and the Emperor, I do love the lightsaber fight between Luke and Vader as well. And Luke is about to snap when Vader tells, if you can't turn to the dark side, then perhaps she, meaning Leia, will. And he's like, no! And he starts hacking and whacking at him, and then he cuts off Vader's hand. And then the Emperor's like, now take his place at my side. And then Luke just chucks his lightsaber away. He's like, I'm not turning to the dark side. You failed, because I'm a Jedi like my father before me. But then the Emperor starts zapping Luke to hell, and then Vader decides that he doesn't want to be Vader anymore and he wants to be Anakin. And then he picks up the Emperor and he throws him down the chasm of the Death Star. Like, that is awesome seeing Vader redeem himself. And not gonna lie, it is pretty sad seeing Luke unmasking Anakin. You see he's all like fleshy and icky and pale. You know, yeah. And then, eventually the rebels, they fly into the Death Star. In this one, it's like the big tunnel and there's lots of stuff in the way and they fly around. Like Lando flies the Falcon, and then you got Wedge from the previous two who flies his X-Wing and they fire at the core. And then they fly out and there's a large firewall that chases after them, and then they fly out and then the Death Star explodes. Oh, and then Luke makes it out too. Yeah. And then everybody on Endor, they all have a celebration. It's kind of cute. I mean, you know, the versions of Return of the Jedi before 1997 used to have that Yub Nub song, the Ewok song, which, is pretty cute. And it makes a lot of sense to hear that song. But then on all the editions of the movie after 97, they had to add like Cloud City and Tatooine and Naboo and Coruscant celebrating, so they had to add that new song in, which it's not bad, but I mean it's not as good as Yub Nub, but it's nowhere near as bad as that terrible Jedi Rock song that they added in the 97 and onwards versions of Jedi. I mean, they could have just kept Lapti Nek in. It was such a good song. It was like some dark, funky song, but still memorable. And then the new one is just like this really bad, like Tina Turner blues song. It's like, no thanks. Um, but yeah, the original trilogy is still iconic, and I still like it. I mean, I may not like it as much as I did when I was 8 or 9, but still, it still holds up in my book, all three. I would say Empire would be my favorite, and then Star Wars would be second, and then Jedi third. And in my book, I think that, Luke becomes the Jedi, he fulfills his destiny, and he redeems Anakin, and, the Empire is all dead and gone, and then the rebels succeeded. You know, that I feel was the most definitive ending to the whole Star Wars saga, until Disney swooped in and made three more. But oh well, right. But so yeah, next time I will talk about the sequel trilogy. So hope you guys like this review and take care.